So broadly, the rule splits cultivation into two categories. One is conventional cultivation with plough and discs to create broken up soil and a finer seed bed. That has more conditions on it. Then there's the other option is minimum tillage techniques like direct drilling, spraying and praying, and spraying and oversowing. So like the hoof and tooth or the spray and pray. Has slightly more permissive conditions, and you can do that over 20 degrees. So the definition of cultivation in the plan is cultivation, preparing land for growing pasture or a crop by mechanical tillage, direct drilling, herbicide spraying or herbicide spraying followed by oversowing for pasture or forage crops. It doesn't include herbicide spraying solely for the control of pest species, and it doesn't include herbicide spraying for the establishment or maintenance of plantation forestry. So the most important requirements are buffers adjacent to waterways, and these depend on the adjacent slope coming down to the waterway. So you might have a flat slope, a sort of medium slope or a steep slope, and depending on that, all the way to the waterway will dictate how big the buffer needs to be. So for 0 to 10 degrees, it's a 5 metre minimum buffer. For 10 to 20 degree slope, it's a 10 metre minimum buffer. And if you're cultivating over 20 degrees, it gets a little bit more tricky. It's 10 metres if you're direct drilling, or 20 metres if you're doing hoof and tooth or spray and pray. So spraying and oversowing. So if you're cultivating by a waterway, there must always be a buffer left in grass. That's the minimum requirement. If you think the buffer needs to be larger to prevent sediment getting in the waterway, then putting a bigger buffer would be our recommendation. Do not cultivate critical source areas of growing winter crop. However, you can cultivate critical source areas when you're establishing pasture, as long as you don't cultivate the adjacent buffer. So there has to be a buffer beside the waterway if you're cultivating the critical source areas in the paddock and establishing pasture. So the third key condition is slope. Conventional cultivation with plough or disc can only be used up to 20 degrees. Once you're over 20 degrees, then you have 3 pathways to be permitted, and one is direct drilling, one is the spray and pray method, and one is hoof and tooth. And there's specific conditions that go along with each of those that's more related to the farmer. If you do want to cultivate the buffers, then you can only do that with it once every 5 years. And cultivation cannot occur 800 metres above sea level. And just a note for farmers, there are additional requirements that you need to add into your farm plan around cultivation. But the farm plan rules are going to be rolled out over the next few years, and again, it's not so relevant to contractors, but just a quick note. So we've got 2 examples of critical source areas currently that we're going to look at. So this one's behind us. So you can see the low-lying area. If you go down and stand in it, there's water there. So that's the sort of thing that we would expect to be left in grass if you were to winter crop this paddock. And you can, if you're driving straight lines, you can just lift the plough or lift the disc. And it's the baseline area, so I'll step it out on this side and then about there. So that's the minimum we would expect to be left in grass. The more significant critical source areas, the wider you'd leave in grass. But anywhere it has the water flowing is a critical source area that's significant enough to leave.